The market of shame. The sky above planet Torgex was black with storm clouds. Thunder rumbled across the metal buildings. Down below, the slave market roared with noise. Loud voices, chains rattling, and the crack of electric whips. Aliens of all shapes and colors filled the market. Rich nobles in gold cloaks walked slowly, pointing at cages like they were choosing fruit. Some slaves were strong, some were beautiful, all of them were scared. Behind a row of large cages was a smaller, rusted one. Inside it, curled in a corner, was a thin alien girl. Her skin was pale blue, her hair tangled and matted. She had no nameplate, no price. Just a word painted on the cage in red letters. Worthless. Most people didn't even look at her. She was small, skinny, and silent. Some laughed when they passed, others spit at her cage. A vendor shouted, "Defective unit, useless even as a servant." The girl didn't flinch. She had stopped reacting long ago. At the edge of the crowd, a tall human stepped off a transport skiff. He wore an old jacket, boots covered in dust, and a calm expression. His name was Jackson Wren, a human trader from the Outer Rim. Humans were rare on Torgex. Most aliens feared them, not for their strength, but for their unpredictability. Jackson didn't come to buy slaves. He hated this place. But he was searching for an old part for his ship. Something cheap, something forgotten. As he walked past the cages, something made him stop. Not a sound. Not a cry. Just silence. He turned, and there she was, in the corner of that rusted cage. Her eyes were too big for her face. Her clothes were torn. She looked barely alive. Jackson looked at the sign again. Worthless. "What's this one?" he asked the vendor, raising an eyebrow. The vendor laughed. "Oh, that, not for sale. She's broken, can't speak, doesn't respond. Maybe used to be part of some experiment. Junk now. We'll toss her into the wastelands. Tomorrow." Jackson frowned. He stepped closer. "Open the cage." The vendor blinked. "You're kidding, right? Do I look like I'm joking?" The vendor scratched his head. "Look, friend. She's not worth even a credit." Jackson tossed a silver coin onto the table. "I'll take her." The cage door creaked open. The girl didn't move. Jackson crouched down. He didn't reach out, didn't speak. He simply waited. After a moment, she raised her head. Her eyes met his, uncertain, dark, and tired. "Come on," he said gently. She didn't understand his words, but something in his voice was different from the others. No command, no hate, just calm. Slowly, she crawled forward. When she tried to stand, she fell. Jackson caught her. She tensed up, ready to be hit, but he just lifted her carefully into his arms. The vendor snorted. "Good luck with that one. Might die by nightfall." Jackson didn't reply. He just walked away through the rain, holding her like something fragile. Back on his small freighter ship, Jackson laid her on a padded bench. He cleaned her face with a warm cloth, gave her water, wrapped her in a soft blanket. She watched him from under the blanket, eyes wide, body stiff. "Can you understand me?" he asked. No answer. "Do you have a name?" "Nothing." He sighed, sat across from her, and leaned back. "I'll call you Lura," he said quietly. She blinked. He smiled. "Yeah, you look like a Lura." That night, while Jackson slept in the pilot chair, Lura sat curled on the bench, wide awake. She stared at the stars through the window. Her body hurt. Her thoughts were tangled. She had no idea why the human had taken her, no idea why he didn't shout, no idea why his hands were gentle. But deep in her chest, something stirred, something she had not felt in years. Hope. She refuses to speak. The freighter drifted quietly through space. Stars blinked in the distance like distant fires. Inside the ship, the lights were dim. Soft hums of the engine filled the silence. Jackson moved around the small kitchen, heating a bowl of broth. His movements were slow, careful. He didn't want to scare her. Behind him, Lura sat at the edge of the bench, blanket wrapped around her thin shoulders. Her eyes never left him. She hadn't said a word, not even a sound. Jackson placed the bowl in front of her. Steam rose into the air. "Try this," he said. She stared at the bowl, then at him. Nothing. He didn't push. "It's just soup," he added. "Not poison, I promise." She didn't move. Jackson sat down on the floor across from her. He didn't speak anymore, just watched, waited. Hours passed. The soup went cold. Still Laura didn't touch it. She kept the blanket tightly wrapped, as if it was the only armor she had left. Jackson didn't blame her. He could see it in her eyes, the fear, the suspicion, the broken trust. She had probably been punished every time she opened her mouth, maybe even for just breathing wrong. He stood up and moved to the control panel. "Destination set, Underdog," he muttered. He didn't notice the small shift in her expression when he said the word Astra, but Laura noticed it. She remembered that place. Not with comfort, but dread. Later that night, Jackson checked on her again. She hadn't eaten, hadn't slept. He sighed and leaned against the wall. "You're free now, you know," he said softly. "No chains, no masters, no markets." She didn't even blink. "I'm not your owner. I don't want to own anyone." Her eyes slowly looked at the floor. "You can sleep here, eat when you want. I won't touch you. I won't yell. I won't ask anything of you." Then he turned and walked away. When the lights dimmed for ship night, Laura rose silently and tiptoed to the food table. She picked up the cold bowl of soup, hands trembling. She sniffed it. No poison. She took one tiny sip. Her eyes watered. She took another, then another. And for the first time in years, her stomach felt warm. She sat on the floor back against the wall, cradling the bowl in her arms like a treasure. In her dreams, she saw white rooms, saw men in silver suits writing things on tablets, heard the word again, error, saw needles, cold hands, a cage with no light. She woke up shaking. Tears streamed down her face. But she didn't make a sound. She never did. In the morning, Jackson checked the table. The bowl was empty. He smiled a little. "Progress," he whispered. They arrived at Underdog later that day. It was a floating station near the edge of the neutral zone, far from central authority but full of smugglers, traders, and unwanted eyes. Jackson lowered the ramp and walked out. Laura watched from the doorway. She knew this place. Years ago, she had been dragged through one of its dark tunnels, cuffed and beaten. Her creators had called it a transfer point. Her legs trembled. But then, she saw Jackson. He was standing up to a group of thugs, refusing to sell cargo. They laughed, threatened. Jackson didn't move, his voice was steady. "I don't sell people, or parts that scream." The thugs left. Laura stared. He could have made money. He could have handed her over. But he didn't. That night, as Jackson sat cleaning his tools, he heard soft footsteps. He looked up. Laura stood there, barefoot, blanket, still wrapped. Her mouth moved. He leaned forward. "Did you say something?" She nodded once, barely, then whispered, almost too quiet to hear. "Laura." Jackson blinked. "Your name?" She nodded again. His voice was gentle. "Hello, Laura." For the first time, her lips trembled into a small, broken smile. Laura's hidden power. Jackson stood silently in the middle of his ship's medbay. The scanners buzzed softly, glowing with a dim blue light. Laura sat on the exam table, nervous and stiff. She didn't like the machines. She didn't trust them, but she trusted Jackson, just enough. "Don't worry," Jackson said gently. "I'm just running a basic scan, nothing painful, no needles, I promise." Laura nodded slowly. The scanner blinked. A low hum echoed as lines of data appeared on the screen. Jackson narrowed his eyes. "What?" The readings didn't make sense. Her blood was not like anything in the database. Her cells were regenerating rapidly. There was strange energy, pulses moving through her nerves. and buried deep in her DNA was a locked sequence, like a forgotten door sealed behind thousands of years. Jackson leaned closer. "You're not defective," he whispered. Laura tilted her head. She didn't understand the words, but she heard the awe in his voice. "You're special," he added. "Very special." Outside the ship, on the lower decks of Underdog, a silent transmission bounced between scanners. Keyword match, genetic anomaly, detected location pinged, freighter, XJ92, registered to human, Jackson Wren begin retrieval. Far away in the shadows of space, something awakened. Jackson printed the scan report and slid it into his datapad. "Laura," he said, turning toward her. "Do you know where you came from?" She shook her head. "Do you remember anything, anyone?" A flicker of memory passed through her eyes. White lights, cold water, metal arms holding her down, and a voice saying, "This one is a failure," she whispered. "They made me." Jackson's jaw tightened. "Who made you?" "Don't know. But they hurt." Her voice cracked at the last word. Jackson knelt beside her. "They won't hurt you again. Not while I'm breathing." For the next few days, Jackson taught her how to move freely around the ship, how to open doors, how to read a few words, how to fix small tools. She watched everything carefully. She was quiet, but sharp, like a knife still in its sheath. One night, he showed her a training orb. "For defense," he explained. "You don't need to fight unless you want to. But it helps to know how." She hesitated, then nodded. The orb floated and fired a soft pulse at her shoulder. Laura flinched, then suddenly, without warning, she moved faster than Jackson could see. She dodged, the next pulse, then the next, and then caught the orb midair. Jackson stared. "Okay," he breathed. "That's not normal." Laura looked at her hands. They were glowing faintly. "What is this?" she whispered. Jackson shook his head. "I think it's you." Meanwhile, deep in a Black Ops lab on the other side of the galaxy, a monitor beeped. A cloaked alien leaned forward. "Subject 9 lives," he hissed. Another voice growled, "Retrieve her." Back on the ship, Jackson and Laura sat on the cargo bay ramp staring at the stars. "I don't know what they did to you," Jackson said softly, "but they were wrong. You're not broken. You're a miracle." Laura didn't answer. She just leaned against his arm, eyes full of questions and fear. Then, alarms blared. Jackson jumped to his feet. Ships were approaching. No signal. No warning. Just hostile intent. He grabbed the controls. "Hold on, Laura." The freighter shook as something hit. The hull. Energy beams burned past their viewports. Jackson cursed. "They found us." Laura stared at the scanners. One symbol blinked red. Her eyes widened. "Them. You recognize that?" She nodded slowly. "Those are the ones who made me." Jackson glanced at her. "Are you ready to run?" She stood tall. Her eyes glowed, faintly. "No," she said. "I'm ready to fight." The price of freedom. Sirens blared across the ship as Jackson dove into the pilot seat. Laser fire cut through the black of space, and warning lights flashed red on the dashboard. Behind him, Laura stood frozen, her hands glowing faintly, eyes wide with memory. The ships chasing them were no ordinary pirates. They were the ones who had created her. Jackson pushed the engine throttle to full. "We've got 2 drones on our tail and a command cruiser behind them," he muttered, checking the readings. "They're not here to talk." He looked back at Laura. "Listen, if they board us, run, hide. Don't let them take you." Laura didn't answer. Instead, she moved closer to the viewport. Her voice was quiet, almost hollow. "They're not here to take me back?" Jackson frowned. "What do you mean?" Her eyes slowly turned toward him. "They're here to erase me." The command cruiser's voice cut through the comms like a knife. "Freighter XJ92, power down. You are harboring stolen experimental property. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." Jackson didn't respond. Instead, he activated the stealth panels and dove toward the asteroid field below. "Hold on." Laura stumbled but caught herself. Her hands flared with light. Brighter now, stronger. The ship jerked hard as a blast hit the rear thruster. Sparks flew from the control panel. They were too fast. Jackson turned to Lura. I have to make a choice. If I jump to hyperspace now, we might escape. But they'll track us. They're not going to stop until they have you. Lura lowered her head. Then let me go. His eyes widened. No. I'll give myself up. They'll leave you alone. He stood up, furious. Don't say that. Don't you ever say that again. Your life's not theirs to take. She looked at him with tears forming. But you don't owe me anything. Jackson's voice shook. I don't owe you. I choose you. Outside, the cruiser prepared to fire its main cannon. Jackson stared at the glowing engines. He had no weapons powerful enough to stop them, but Lura stepped forward. She opened the rear hatch. What are you doing? Jackson shouted. Her voice was steady. Trust me. The vacuum of space sucked at her clothes as she walked toward the force field. Her hair floated in the artificial gravity wind, then her skin shimmered. Her body rose slightly off the ground. She spread her arms, and light poured from her like a storm. From inside the enemy cruiser, the alien commander stared at. The sensors in horror. Contain her now, he screamed. But it was too late. A pulse of ancient energy blasted from Lura's chest. It traveled across space in a blink, hitting the first drone ship and splitting it apart. The second one froze, its systems melting under the overload. Jackson watched from the cockpit, speechless. Lura was glowing like a sun, and she was floating in open space untouched. But then, her body jerked. She cried out. Too much energy, too fast. Jackson ran to the rear of the ship, grabbed her as she fell through the force field, and pulled. Her inside, she was burning hot, trembling. You saved us, he whispered. She barely nodded. But they'll come again. He held her close. Then we'll be ready. Back on the cruiser, the alien commander snarled. She's activated. Another officer asked, What do we do now? He growled. We double the bounty. And this time, we bring the harvester. 2 days later, Jackson parked his ship in a quiet moon station to repair the damage. The place was old, forgotten, with no patrols and no questions. Lura sat on the rooftop under a fake sky dome. Her eyes followed the stars above. Jackson joined her, sitting beside her in silence. I didn't know I could do that, she said softly. You're not a weapon, he replied. You're a person. What you do with your power, that's your choice. She looked at him. Then I choose to stay. He smiled gently, but they both knew peace wouldn't last. They would come again, and next time, they wouldn't come lightly. The arena of bones. The moon station was supposed to be safe, quiet, forgotten, but it wasn't forgotten enough. They came at dawn. Jackson was repairing the ship's main thruster when he saw the shadow fall over the hangar. A sleek black vessel, with no flags, no insignia, just a symbol carved into its hull, a jagged circle surrounding a single red eye. He froze. He had seen that symbol before, on the cuffs that once chained Lura. He dropped the tool and ran toward the living quarters. Too late. The door had been blown open. Smoke hung in the air. Lura was gone. All that remained was a patch of burned metal where she had stood, and a small whispering device left behind. Jackson picked it up, heart pounding. A voice crackled to life. Jackson Wren, the girl is ours. If you want her, come to Sector 14K. You'll find her in the arena. They wanted a show. They wanted the world to see what happened to those who stole their creations, so they took her to the arena of bones, a cursed battleground deep in space, where ancient rules still lived. The law was brutal. If you want what's ours, fight for it. Jackson flew without rest. No plan, no backup, just rage. When he arrived, the arena loomed like a graveyard in the sky. Black stone floating in orbit, surrounded by hundreds of silent alien watchers. He was thrown into the pit with no armor, no weapons. Above him, high on the stands, Lura was chained to a post. Her eyes widened when she saw him. "No," she whispered. "You should have left," the alien commander growled from above. "Now both of you die." The gate opened. A beast the size of a hover tank stepped forward. Metal spikes along its spine, claws like razors, and eyes that glowed blue with fury. Jackson stared at it. No gun. No knife. Nothing but bare hands. He took a deep breath, then ran toward it. The beast roared, swung. Jackson ducked, rolled under, and climbed onto its back. It thrashed, slamming him against the stone. Pain exploded in his ribs. He fell. The beast charged. And then Lura screamed, a scream that echoed across the sky. Her chains shattered. Light burst from her chest, and the entire arena froze. She floated down into the pit, landing between Jackson and the monster. Her eyes were glowing again, but this time they were steady, controlled. The beast snarled. Lura raised a hand. Energy pulsed from her fingers. The beast dropped instantly, its mind overwhelmed. The crowd gasped, but the commander above simply smiled. "You've learned to focus it," he said. "Good. Now let's see how far you'll go." He dropped into the pit himself, a full-grown war-class alien with armor made of living metal. "You want your freedom? Girl," he hissed. "Take it from me." Jackson tried to rise, but he was bleeding. Lura stood in front of him. She didn't scream this time. She breathed, and the ground cracked beneath her. The commander charged. They clashed like stars colliding. Each blow shook the arena. Jackson watched, in awe as Lura fought, not like a weapon, but like a warrior with something to protect. For every time they beat her, for every name they called her, for every second she was told she was worthless, she hit back, and she didn't stop, until the commander fell, unmoving, defeated. The crowd was silent. Then, one by one they stood and bowed, not to Jackson, not to the commander, but to the girl once marked as worthless. Later, as Jackson limped onto his ship, Lura helped him sit. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. He smiled through bruised lips. "You're worth fighting for." She looked at him, eyes soft, glowing less now. "I remember now," she said. "Remember what? Who I was before they erased me." Jackson leaned forward. She smiled sadly. "I was never a mistake. I was their greatest creation, until I chose to think for myself." The ones who created her deep in the void beyond known space, a cold, silver moon hung in orbit. Beneath its surface was Lab Zero, a place erased from official maps, a place where things were built and broken. Inside, rows of tanks lined the walls, each filled with liquid and shadowy figures. They were not soldiers. They were projects. And at the center of it all, a tall, thin being with white eyes watched, the data feed with no emotion. "Subject 9 has activated full-phase potential," he said. "Recall all retrieval teams. She's coming to us." On board Jackson's ship, the stars stretched past as they drifted in silence. Jackson lay on the medbed, his chest bandaged, breathing slow. Lura sat beside him, her fingers glowing softly as she tried to heal the bruises. She had learned to focus her light, to heal instead of harm. "You don't have to fix me," he whispered, eyes half open. She smiled faintly. "You came for me. Let me return the favor." Jackson looked at her carefully. "You said you remembered all of it?" She nodded. Lura had been made in Lab Zero. Not born, engineered, crafted by the most advanced minds of her species to be a perfect hybrid, part organic, part energy, part weapon. But there had been a problem. She developed emotions, conscious thought, a soul. When she refused to harm innocent prisoners during a test, they declared her defective. They marked her worthless. They locked her away. Jackson's voice was tight. "And now, they want to finish what they started." Lura stood, eyes hard. "No, they want to use me again, but I'm not theirs anymore." Jackson charted a course. "Are you sure?" he asked. "If we go back there, it's a suicide mission." She met his gaze. "They built me to destroy. I choose what I destroy now. They arrived at Lab Zero days later. No weapons drawn, no fleet behind them, just one freighter and 2 souls ready to face the ghosts. The moon greeted them with silence. As Jackson landed, defenses lit up, but none fired. They were expected. The halls were cleaner than any city. White tiles, chrome walls, buzzing lights that never flickered. Jackson and Lura walked side by side. Doors opened without resistance. And then, the room. A dome with one glowing chair at its center. Around it stood her creators. Cold-faced beings with long arms and silver eyes. Subject 9, one said. You've returned. Lura said nothing. Jackson stepped forward. Her name is Lura. The lead scientist turned. You are irrelevant, human. Step aside. Jackson didn't move. Another scientist spoke. Your emotional bonds are still functioning. That's unfortunate. They reached for a control pad. Lura raised a hand. Don't. But they pressed the command. Pain ripped through her body. Her knees buckled. They had never removed her core failsafe. Jackson shouted her name. They didn't stop. They meant to erase her now. Slowly, painfully, so her energy would power the next phase of their project. But something was different this time. This time, Lura didn't break. She screamed, not in pain, but in defiance. Her energy pulsed outward, white, hot, pure. She reached inside, herself, past the commands, past the programming. She rewrote it. The fail-safe shattered. The room exploded in light. The scientists fell back, shielding their faces. When the glow faded, Lura stood, hovering slightly off the floor. Her voice was steady. I am not your tool. She moved her hands in the air. Each tank in the lab shattered. The projects inside, once silent, opened their eyes. They had been trapped in frozen minds, asleep for years. But Lura touched them with her light, woke them, freed them. The lab was filled. With life now, free will returned to those who never had a choice. The scientists tried to flee. But Jackson blocked the exit. You'll answer for what you've done, he said coldly. Lura stood in the middle of the lab, surrounded by others like her. She could have destroyed the place, burned it to ash. But she didn't. She turned and walked out. They didn't need to fight anymore. They had won. Outside, as they watched Lab Zero sink into silence, Jackson turned to her. You okay? She looked up at the stars. I don't know what I am anymore, he smiled. Then you get to decide. The worthless one who saved worlds. Space was quiet again, but not empty. Jackson's freighter floated calmly near the ruins of Lab Zero, now abandoned. Its creators arrested by a coalition fleet after receiving a full transmission of their crimes. The proof sent by Lura. She had exposed everything, the illegal experiments, the enslaved minds, the truth behind her creation. The galaxy had no choice but to act. Inside the ship, Lura stood at the window staring at the stars. But they felt different now. For the first time, they didn't look cold. They looked open, hopeful. Behind her, Jackson walked in with 2 mugs of warm tea. He offered one. Still like it sweet? He asked. She nodded, taking the mug with both hands. Thank you, she whispered. For the tea? She smiled faintly. For not giving up on me? Across the galaxy, news spread fast. A failed creation from a banned lab breaks her chains and exposes a dark truth. The girl called Worthless has saved hundreds. Some called her a hero. Some called her a weapon. But she didn't care what they called her. She knew who she was now. Weeks later, the coalition invited her to speak on the central station. Hundreds gathered. Humans, aliens, soldiers, civilians. Jackson stood quietly off stage. He watched as Lura stepped forward in simple clothes. No armor, no glow, just herself. She looked nervous, unsure. Then she saw Jackson's nod. She took a breath and began. I was built, not born. I was made to follow, to hurt, to obey. But someone treated me like I mattered. Someone gave me a choice. And now I choose to protect the ones who can't protect themselves. Not because I was told to, but because I want to. The hall was silent for a long time. Then, applause. Real, honest, thunderous. Laura bowed her head. After the speech, she walked back to Jackson, cheeks warm with emotion. I still don't understand why you did it, she said softly. Why you saved me back then. You didn't even know me. Jackson sipped his tea, then looked her in the eye. Because no one else did. The next day, the Coalition Council offered her a position, not as a soldier, not as a weapon, but as a peacekeeper. Someone who could visit troubled systems, help the forgotten, free the trapped. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked the long corridor of the station alone, thinking. She passed children laughing, an old alien woman waving, a young boy with cybernetic legs who saluted her with tears in his eyes. Finally, she turned and whispered, yes. Her first mission took her to a mining colony where slave riots had broken out. Jackson went with her. They landed at night, the wind thick with dust. Armed guards surrounded a group of chained workers. The guards raised their guns until they saw her and froze. Is that the one from the lab? That's the girl who tore down the arena. She stepped forward. No weapons, no threats, just a quiet voice. Let them go. The guards hesitated. Then they lowered their guns. One by one, the chains were unlocked. Laura looked back at Jackson. He smiled. You didn't even have to lift a hand. That's not power, she said. That's choice. In the weeks that followed, she helped dozens of colonies, freed hundreds, built peace where there had only been fear. She wasn't worshipped. She didn't want that. She wanted something else. A universe where no one had to feel like she once did. Small, scared, worthless. One night, back on their ship, Jackson asked her, if you could go back to that market, to that cage, what would you say to the girl sitting in the corner? Laura thought for a moment, then smiled sadly. I'd say, hold on. Someone is coming. And now, she was the one coming, for all of them.